You're listening to the Living Inside Out podcast, and I'm your host, Toks. This is episode 98. Welcome to the Living Inside Out podcast, where we believe the mind is the engine room of your life. Episode 98 is Overcoming Weariness, Staying Energized on Your Journey. Welcome to July. Well, almost. It's the start of the second half of the year. How time flies, eh? In the many years that I've been on earth, I've learned to appreciate cliches. Cliches like time flies. Cliches tend to be incredibly true. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. So how has it been for you? How have you navigated the first 6 months? Many people I know set goals at the start of the year. I hope you are achieving them. And if you're not, it's not too late to get started. We still have 6 whole months to go. That's a lot. That's better than 6 days. And also, sometimes we place these limits on ourselves that if we don't achieve XYZ by month 3 or month 4, then whatever, ... I think that just because lives, we need to be gracious to ourselves. Being gracious doesn't mean being slack, but give yourself some grace and some space, because there is so much that happens that we have no power over. And we want to keep on pushing forward as though it didn't happen. So if that's you, give yourself some grace. However, if you find yourself stagnant, either due to overwhelm or uncertainty about how to move forward, why don't you book a complimentary strategy session with me, and let's see if I can help you. As a certified coach, I'm passionate about seeing people who know that they should be doing more, but don't know how to do more. I'm passionate about helping them propel forward on their path. So if you want to have a chat, it's free for 30 minutes. Details are on my website, toks.com, or send an email to pa@toks.com. There's no obligation to work with me, but I guarantee you that the 30 minutes will be good. It will be a nice exploration into your mind, and you will come away with some tidbits as well. I'll also leave a link to my Calendly or my calendar. Calendly. I love Calendly, by the way, which is founded by a Nigerian, so I promote it wherever I go. So I've got a link to my Calendly, which connects to my calendar. You can click through and see if you can find a 30-minute session. My July is a packed one already. So you may find there's only a couple of slots available in July. But send an email to Priel anyway, pa@toks.com, and we will make it happen. I am so excited to record this podcast episode today. I have waited for this moment where I'd finally feel more like myself again after what felt like such a long, drawn-out dry spell. So I knew it would end, because I know and love the phrase, it can't rain forever, but I didn't know when, and I didn't know how. So I feel very qualified to talk about overcoming weariness, because as you know, your girl was weary. With a capital W and a capital E and A and R and a big Y. I really was. But if I've ever had any doubts about the reason we go through trials, now I know for sure that they are designed to fit into our purpose, even if you don't know what your purpose is. There are quite a few cues as to what that could be, but one thing's for sure is that it should tick 3 boxes. And I've said this multiple times on this podcast before. 1, it should bring glory to God. 2, it should help the people on your path. And 3, it should grow you in the process. So in a nutshell, you know that you have met your purpose, or you're walking in your purpose, or you've identified it at least when it ticks those three boxes. And it also requires the use of your gift. That's the output. The way you help others is by using your gift. But here's what I know for sure, that the long drawn out challenges I experienced up until recently, which resulted in weariness and exhaustion and fed upness, occurred so that I could understand what it really means to be tired, what it feels like to be done. I believe that our experiences, like I mentioned about purpose, are designed to help us bless others on our path. And one way in which that's helping me, and it will help us, is that we can empathize with others who are going through stuff. If you don't know the pain of loss, and you don't know the pain of great disappointment and hopelessness, it's going to be very hard to minister to and nurture and help somebody who's going through it. Because you might look on the outside and say, well, she's crying because, she lost her job, while other people have died in a war. And that's a whole nother topic, is grading pain, which we will talk about in the future. Is you can't grade pain, because pain is not based on circumstance. It's based on something deeper. It's based on thoughts and perspective, and that's happening on the inside. So you cannot look at a person's circumstance and decide what they should be emoting for them. But that's by the way. I believe that what I've been going through existed so that I can strip weariness and exhaustion and fatigue and everything that I experience, strip it down to its core and expose it to you. So you are being blessed today, I hope, by this conversation, or you will be blessed by it. So my experience led me to becoming so tired that nothing excited me. And I was literally on the brink of feeling hopeless, because when I looked around me, I couldn't find any reason to hope for what I wanted, because it was not in the horizon at all. Now, if you've been listening for any length of time to Living Inside Out, you'd have heard me say that there are treasures in dark places, but many of us search for the exit door and not the treasure. You would also have heard me say that challenges are lesson teachers. And one thing I know is that the wealth of priceless gems I've recently acquired from coming out of this recent trial is on another level. It's on a high. It's on a 10 times 10. Because the more intense a difficult season is, the more gems are mined out of that pit. I love the scripture that says God comforts us so that with the same comfort we can comfort others. And with my most recent experience, I believe that it will help you to navigate the path if you find yourself in that space as well. If you find yourself feeling discouraged and tired, but you've got to keep going. And I'm hoping that you will learn a few tips to remain energized on your journey, regardless of what's happening around you. And I'll share this over the next few weeks, but we'll start with a definition from Merriam-Webster, which says, weariness is exhausted in strength, endurance, vigor, or freshness. So physically, you're done. Mentally, you are done. Spiritually, the part of you that gives you life or excites you, done. Freshness, you feel dull. And it comes about when you experience disappointment after disappointment, and then you become discouraged. And the discouragement devolves into hopelessness, and hopelessness gives way to apathy, which can even lead to depression. And depression is a permanent state of hopelessness, not permanent as in you'll never come out of it, but there is really nothing that's telling you to be hopeful, or it's living without any form of hope in the horizon. And people who have experienced or lived with depression describe it as a dark pit that you can't come out of. So imagine looking all around you and there is no indication of your circumstance ever changing. And then you accept defeat and resolve to sit in that space. That's what I imagine depression to be like. The goal of the enemy when he attacks us is to stop us from fulfilling our purpose, period. If he can, at the end of our lives, laugh and say they never even became what you meant for them to become, he would have won. Maybe not won, but he would have achieved his own goal. Because a lot of times when Satan attacks us, it's not us he's after, it's God who wants to say, hey, see what I'm doing to your child. And particularly if you yourself give up and say, what's the point? Or you dial down your goals or you dial down your purpose and say, there's no point aiming so high because it's so far away. I have no hope in it. Again, your purpose is important because that's the reason you were created. And God made you after he had a purpose for you. So he had a purpose, he had a goal on earth, and he created you to fulfill it. And your longing and yearning for that version of you that you can't shake off is also God's desire for you. So his purpose is not some random, thought in the heavenlies that you have no interest in and you've got to force yourself because you want to be spiritual. No, you actually want the same thing for yourself that God wants for you. Even if you might not fully be able to comprehend exactly what it is, or you may not be able to put your finger on it, but daily you're aiming for it and you're walking towards it, whether or not you know it or not. But then weariness sets in and you might give up, or you might start to settle, or you reduce your goals, your plans, your dreams. And you begin to say, well, at least I have this and I have that. Maybe I was being greedy. Maybe I was trying too hard. And I confess that I did feel that way, felt a little bit I had an epiphany one day and I thought that the size of my dreams is equivalent to the intensity of the challenge, and I'm done. I don't want to suffer anymore. So I think I need to pull my dreams back down. But thankfully, God has been able to keep me going. Someone asked me recently how I was able to keep going when it made sense to stop. And I told her that it was because I believed so strongly in the future that my imagination was feeding me that I couldn't unbelieve it. I couldn't pretend it didn't happen. Now, knowing where you're headed, knowing what your goal is, knowing what your purpose is, does not absolve you of challenges. And it doesn't mean that you suddenly become stronger because you have this knowledge. You will still have trials because you live in a fallen world. So let's look at some common causes of overwhelm. As you know, we're made up of spirit, soul, and body, and we straddle all three dimensions, the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual at exactly the same time. So it means then that there are physical causes of overwhelm and fatigue, and there are emotional and there are spiritual as well. There are spiritual, did you hear me? There are spiritual forces at play. The enemy always means it for evil, but God always turns it around for the good of his children. In a future episode, we're going to discuss this in more detail because I discovered some mind-blowing truths around this. But when you succumb to weariness, it stops you from fulfilling your goals, and it stops you from converting the invisible that you alone could see into its tangible form that we can see and experience. And then it keeps you paralyzed so that you're not useful to the people that you've come to help or serve. And overwhelm stops you from doing the work that God created you to do. But I love the scripture that says, in this world you'll face many difficulties, but take heart, I have overcome the world. It follows then that if we're going to address this state of being, this weariness and tiredness and fed upness, we've got to recognize the signs. Some of the physical signs include chronic fatigue and irritability. You see, I have no issues falling asleep and staying asleep, and I'm so thankful to God for that. I sleep like a baby regardless. I think it's only maybe a few times in my life I can count on one hand where I struggled to sleep because I was worried. Two of those times involved serious illnesses it for in my family, my household, and I can't remember. I remember one of them was when I first moved to my store where I am now. That will come in the future. I may have already told the story, but I'll tell you that again later. But yeah, I have no issue sleeping. I sleep well, yet I was waking up tired. I'd go to sleep and my alarm goes off and I get up and I'm as tired as though I had been working through the night. And then I would increase my consumption of caffeine to keep me awake. But what that did was heighten any anxiety that was lurking. Other physical signs of weariness is headaches, muscle pain. This was interesting because I was getting a lot of muscle pain and I thought it was me getting older. And then that depressed me some more. Like, oh my goodness, my body's finishing. Frequent illnesses is another one. I did a bit of research and the link between the mind and the body is just incredible because a low emotional state can suppress your immune system, which then leaves you susceptible to illness. Some of the emotional and mental signs is or are a lack of motivation, irritability. I put irritability in physical, but it's actually a mental sign of overwhelm. Lack of motivation. This one was very real for me. I would have moments of inspiration in which I will write my list and I'll have my plan for the day and so on and so forth. And it would lead me to commit to taking action. And then nothing. Silence. I wouldn't be able to move. Difficulty concentrating is another one. If you find yourself wandering off during a conversation or unable to stick to tasks for long periods of time, you might be experiencing overwhelm or weariness. And this is a particularly concerning one because our attention span as humans is dropping drastically due to our consumption of short content on social media. We struggle to concentrate for more than 7 seconds. Can you believe that? So, what we're doing is actively acquiring symptoms of emotional or mental fatigue before we even get to that point. And then, feelings of hopelessness is another symptom of it. Now, let's look at some practical tips to come out of this very unhealthy state. Number one, get enough sleep. In the last week, I have increased my sleeping hours. I didn't realize it, but I had been surviving on 4 or 5 hours of sleep consistently. Again, it wasn't because I couldn't sleep, but it was because I have a wake up time of 4 a.m. on purpose, but my bedtime is supposed to be 9 p.m. But I rarely got to bed before midnight. So I'd sleep from about midnight or 11:30 and I'm up at 4. No wonder I was sleepy during the day. But this then had a knock-on effect on everything I was doing. So I couldn't get to bed on time because I wasn't concentrating long enough during the day or I was demotivated. So all of my today tasks would end up being pushed to nighttime where I would either rush through it or wake up feeling overwhelmed that I had to do it. So it's a vicious cycle. Healthcare experts recommend 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night. Ignore the nagging thought that says you're wasting time or that you have so much to do. And this mindset is common with students and entrepreneurs alike. A well-rested mind can produce more in 1 hour than a tired one would produce in 4 hours. If you've ever been really exhausted and you're still trying to work, you know what that's like. You may tell yourself, I'm going to sit at this for an hour. But then 30 minutes later, you only typed out 3 words if you're writing. So don't just sleep, but have regular scheduled sleep, which means have a bedtime and a wake up time. My son recently made some adjustments to my phone by changing the view to dark and also turned off blue light because apparently the white light from our devices affects the quality of our sleep, even if we do sleep. So don't use the fact that you're sleeping as judgment for the fact that you're sleeping well, because you may not be. I clearly wasn't getting good quality sleep. Well, I certainly wasn't getting enough either. The second tip is look at your nutrition and diet. And the easiest way to do this is to pretend you don't know what good food is and read up with the mind of a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old. Women require specific nutrients, and also we require these at different seasons of our lives. And so this goes beyond just eating more fruit and more vegetables like they tell us to. You've got to be intentional about what you're eating. What are you lacking? Go and get some blood tests done. Find out what's lacking in your system, and then get yourself some supplements, and then become intentional about the food you're eating to increase levels of vitamins. For example, I had no idea that I needed magnesium. Like, it's never ever crossed my mind, like, hey, let's go buy some magnesium. But now I'm on iron. I've placed myself on iron tablets, vitamin D, and a multivitamin supplement for women over 50, because I'm no longer going to let my mind deceive me into thinking that the only solution to the situation I have is whatever I think the situation needs to be: a life partner, or healing, or money, or whatever it is that you think that you need. That's actually not necessarily the answer. Often our inability to solve the problems in our lives is the real culprit. It's not the problem themselves that's the problem. Is the fact that we can't solve it, and we can't solve it because we can't think straight, or we're tired all the time, or we're exhausted, or we're drained, or emotionally we're fatigued. And so we've got to look at our lives holistically and examine, where are we lacking physically, emotionally, spiritually? What's our diet like? All the stuff that I've mentioned. And then there's obviously regular exercise. Martin Luther King said, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. And if you can't walk, crawl. But whatever you do, keep moving forward. Now, it's a very inspirational quote that is said all over the place, but I've seen it written and quoted in many places. But it doesn't just apply to major causes or career choices, but it applies to our bodies as well. Yes, we all want to be that woman with the toned arms and the flat belly running on the beach in a nice bikini, showing off her belly, showing off her arms. But it doesn't have to be your immediate goal. You can start small with whatever you can. Walking is highly beneficial. Doesn't have to be a massively brisk walk either. Doesn't have to be for miles and miles. Just start walking, especially if you can do so in a park or greenery, or where there's nature. God gave us nature to enjoy. That way you are feeding your mind and also nurturing your body at the same time. Don't feel like you also have to fill your walking time with conversations or even audiobooks or podcasts or anything. Living Inside Out is an exception. Just kidding. But there are times that it's good to just be silent. Just walk and be silent, so that your spirit, which is one with God, can offer you its own bespoke solution to your own unique situation. So, moving forward mentally, there's a few things that you can do. For more on this, I'm actually going to refer you to the previous 2 episodes. But one thing that I will say that gave me a whole new perspective was to accept that the situation that I'd been fighting was here to stay. This is not accepting defeat. This is not giving up or anything like that. But it's going from fighting a circumstance to looking at it with a new perspective so you can navigate the circumstance. I accepted that the long drawn out situation I was in was not going to one day stop so I could go back to life as I knew it. And rather, this is it. This is my new life now. And when I say this is my new life, I don't mean the weariness or the tiredness. I mean the circumstance. In the previous episode, I used the example of farmers. I think it was 2 episodes ago, so it would have been number 95 or 96, actually, 96. I used the example of farmers, one in an arid, dry region with dry, hard sand or soil, and the other one in a well-watered region with soft, moist, green, supporting soil. And the guy within the arid region does not wake up every morning complaining about how hard the ground is, because that's just his circumstance. That's the land he's been given. And the one in the nice soft green area doesn't wake up every morning saying, oh, how lucky I am to have such soft soil. They just get on with it because they don't know any better. That's their circumstance. And so I thought, if I can accept where I'm at as my circumstance, how will I do things differently? What will I do differently? And I came up with a new strategy. If this season I'm in is my life, if I had just been birthed into this life and this is all I knew, how will I navigate it? And I want you to do the same as well. If you have also been in a season where you've been waiting for things to change, I'm not saying that you should no longer expect that it would change, but how about you change your perspective instead and look at it as a circumstance and not a temporal situation, and then say, what would I do? How will I live with this? And you'll be very surprised to see how your own soul comes up with solutions for you to move forward. So I'm going to stop now because I'm out of time. But next time, we will talk about looking at things from a spiritual perspective. And I'll talk a little bit more about this final point because there was a little bit more I wanted to say. But in the meantime, let's connect on social media. My handle is @Toks on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. I'd love to connect with you there. I share a lot more on Instagram and also LinkedIn, actually. Sometimes it's long stories. Well, long stories is Facebook. Instagram is short videos, and LinkedIn is kind of a combination of both. I'm a little bit more well-behaved on LinkedIn because you know how they are. This is not LinkedIn material. But I'd love to connect with you, and I would love for you to share this podcast with your contacts, especially 1 or 2 people that you think could use it. Maybe they're going through a season that's discouraging for them as well, and they could use some encouragement. And if you haven't subscribed and you haven't rated, please do. Please. Because it helps other people to find the podcast, and I feel blessed that I'm able to reach more people as well. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day, whatever you're doing, and thank you for listening. Till next time, remember to live from the inside out. God bless.